Excited to have you here today for our virtual event, Getting Started on Your Indiana Global Career. Today's event is organized by the Indiana Language Roadmap. Based at Indiana University, the Indiana Language Roadmap aims to improve global skills training and world language instruction throughout the state to benefit all Hoosiers by bringing together stakeholders across sectors and the state. I'm Ashley Eason, Vice President of Programs and Services for the International Center, a proud partner with the Indiana Language Roadmap, and I'll be your moderator today. Our panel is going to be discussing the variety of global careers that exist in Indiana and how high school and college students like you can gain important skills and then market those skills to start your global career. We're so glad all of you have joined us, and we really encourage you to utilize the chat today to speak to each other and to the panelists. Please, again, give us a shout out from where you're calling in from, your high school, your university, what part of the state. We're so happy to get to know all of you that have joined us today. I'm going to kick off with a brief introduction of our 5 panelists, and then we will jump right in. So we're really happy today to be joined by Marie Mcintosh, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for Employability. Employability executes a vision that all residents in Indianapolis should have access to the services and training needed to achieve a livable wage, while also meeting employers' demand for talent. She also has experience at the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. She also serves as an adjunct instructor for the Butler University Lacey School of Business MBA program, and has a lot of experience across different industries here in Indiana. Welcome, Marie. We also have with us Garrett Martin. He's a recent graduate of the Purdue and Indiana Joint Campus from Fort Wayne, and he's now an IT analyst at Zimmer Biomet, one of our medical device manufacturing companies based in Warsaw, Indiana. He focuses on creating and repairing code and maintaining industrial software for automating production processes, and he studied computer science and math, and we're really happy to have him join us today. We also have Shant Sizemore, who's the CEO of the Lawrence County Economic Growth Council and the Bedford Area Chamber of Commerce. Really excited to have the perspective of local economic development organization here with us. It's one of those parts of the industry that may not automatically be obvious to all of us that it is global, that there's global engagement both on the local stage and in attracting foreign investment and global talent. We also have Tony Watterson with us, who's Executive Director of Southern Indiana Works. SIW is a nonprofit, business and industry-led organization that represents Clark, Crawford, Floyd, Harrison, Scott, and Washington counties here in our state. And he also has experience as the Director of Workforce Development for the Thomas P. Miller and Associates, which is a national consulting firm. We also have with us, finally, Tracy York, who is the Vice President of Global Talent Management for Berry Global, based in Southern Indiana. She works with professionals and works on professional and personal development programs across the US, Europe, South America, and Asia from right here in the US. She also has experience with Belk department stores and Lowe's home improvement stores. So thank you so much to our panelists for joining us today and bringing your expertise to this conversation. So a little bit about how we're going to run this panel. We're so appreciative to so many of you who provided questions in advance. That has really helped shape our conversation and the questions we'll be asking. Because our time is limited and we're in this fun virtual format, we won't be opening it up to live questions, but we do encourage you to engage with each other in the chat, and we'll look to follow up with you if you have a specific question for us later. So thanks everybody, and here we go. We're gonna start with a question to our panelists that if they would please introduce themselves in a little more depth, particularly how their career path is tied to global. And how global issues and opportunities played along the way to get them to the role they're in today. So let's kick it off actually with Garrett. Would you mind kicking us off? You're most recently engaged in job searching from graduating just a couple years ago.
Yes, I have. I'm Garrett Martin. I serve in IT at course, Zimmer Biomet in Warsaw, a 2018 graduate of Indiana Purdue. I'm relatively new to my career. I've definitely had started to have some interactions with our global company, Zimmer Biomet. I started as a contractor at the company, and I didn't have much experience with global companies, but that really started to show me how a large company like that works with all different sites and everything. But now I'm full-time there, so it's definitely a learning experience for me.
Fantastic. Garrett, thank you so much. Marie, would you mind introducing yourself and a little bit more about your career, please?
Sure. I'm so grateful to be here today. Thank you to Ashley and the Indiana Language Roadmap, Teresa, for inviting me to be part of this panel. I would say that it's probably fair to say that my career path, started in high school when I began thinking about what I might want to do and what I might want to study. And I had the opportunity in high school to study German language and found my way over to Germany. I was fortunate to be able to go there when I was in high school. And I think it just set a tone for what I wanted to do in my life, that I wanted, where I could, to try to engage other perspectives and just try to understand different cultures. So I really loved that experience. So when I went to Indiana University, I applied to study abroad for a year at the University of Kent in Canterbury, England, and really loved that year-long experience for a whole host of reasons that I won't go into too much detail about today. But it did lead to me coming back. I was part of the liberal arts management program at IU as well, and I had the opportunities to do some consulting work or to go be a student worker part-time in Europe, and chose the latter and ended up landing a job at the university that I had worked for as a recruiter of other international students, which really kicked off my career in universities. So I spent a year doing that, and then came back to the US and worked for DePaul University, doing sort of academic and program management that also had a sort of international component to it, and then moved to Butler and worked for their Institute for Study Abroad at Butler University, which is an affiliated nonprofit, and was able to get my MBA while I was at Butler. And that led to me working at an organization in Indianapolis called Marion Inc., that where I did marketing for them. And they are a small private manufacturing firm that's global in nature. They had offices, manufacturing facilities in Singapore, and they opened one in China while I was there. And so had the opportunity to work there as a marketing manager. And all of that experience led me to taking an opportunity at the state of Indiana to work on sort of workforce development and program management issues for the state, on how we build our own talent. And so in that capacity over the last decade, I've had the opportunity to engage in sort of global perspectives, largely through economic development conversations, which I know that other panelists will speak to, but also trying to help students, high school students and university students, understand the importance of what we call employability skills, you may call soft skills, and how sort of language instruction and cultural experiences help you to build those skills in a lot of ways. So I think I'll stop there for now. I've been at Employability for 5 years, and I'm loving that role at the city.
Marie, thank you so much. I have a lot of follow-up questions, but we'll get to those shortly. Thank you so much. Shantz, would you mind sharing a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, so my name is Shantz Sizemore. Unlike Marie, I had no idea what college life was going to be like or what I wanted to study. I knew smart people became doctors. So I attended the University of Southern Indiana to become a doctor. Got into that profession, or into the training, decided that was not where I wanted to be. And then actually kind of landed in communication studies as my career and my area of study, mostly because it was the one area that really challenged me. It was not a skill set that I had. Ultimately, I worked as a manager and a trainer for a CVS pharmacy during my time in college. Took a little longer, graduated after a while from the University of Southern Indiana, and then moved into the economic development role. So at that point in time, I moved to an organization that actually just merged in Evansville, but it was the Growth Alliance for Greater Evansville. Started off really just cutting red tape, moved into what I would call a more traditional role in economic development, looking at sites and property acquisition for the companies interested in the area. And then my final time there was spent in the innovation space. So working with people who were creating new companies. I got to do some fun projects like create the co-work space that's in downtown Evansville, Makerspace, work for people really across the globe who are moving to Evansville for a variety of reasons, working remotely, et cetera. Then an opportunity popped up to come back to my hometown to help them. So about 5 years ago now, I moved to Lawrence County to take on the role of CEO of both the Lawrence County Economic Development Agency and the Chamber of Commerce. So here I do much of what I would call traditional local economic development work, working with our existing industries, helping them solve their issues, connecting to them to resources. One of the big pieces that we often don't think about is while I have companies that are owned by people who are locals, their resource pipeline, their supplies for production and their marketplaces are global. So having the ability to tap into the greater resources of international companies is a big key in kind of my day-to-day work now.
Fantastic. Chance, thanks so much. I also have a lot of follow-up questions for you on working with some of those companies that wouldn't expect them to be global, but there's so many layers and components to our work every day that may not appear that way on the front, but behind the scenes, there's a ton of global work happening. Tony Watterson, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I'm Tony Watterson. I'm with Southern Indiana Works, and I've known Marie for maybe a decade now, and I did not realize how different our career paths were until right now to get to a very similar position in our careers. But I actually went to high school and graduated from Columbia City High School, which is near Fort Wayne and Warsaw. I did not take advantage of opportunities that Marie did by abroad. It's probably one of my greatest regrets, both in college, especially, and in high school. But I graduated from Hanover College with a degree in history. There's a perfect opportunity at Hanover and like many other colleges and universities to study abroad. We actually have a month a year that you could go do that. I did not take advantage of that. I chose the lesser stringent path of staying on campus and playing wiffle ball during the spring term and having a good time. But my original, I think Shant said it too, I was pre-med until I realized that you had to take a lot of science classes, and then that really wasn't in my nature. And it turns out I pass out when I give blood, so I probably wouldn't have been a very good doctor. I went on to grad school and got a master's at Indiana State in history. And then I decided that it was probably time to find a career and stop going to college and enter the workforce. So I guess up until that point, I really lived in a very small world of Tony, right? And I did not realize how connected the world was becoming at that time or would eventually be. And so as I entered the workforce, I found myself running lumber companies, and for a large lumber company called 84 Lumber. And that was probably the first time I really realized how small the world was. And I would learn through the 5 or so years that I ran lumber companies, the effect that the global economy has on a small business in Southern Indiana or a small business in Northern Indiana. I eventually fell into the career field of workforce and talent development. And that led me to Thomas P. Miller and Associates, which is a national consulting firm. And that was really the first time that I started in my career working with global companies and doing global projects. We worked for Jamaica and did a project abroad. And it was the first time I had been to a foreign country where I wasn't going to a beach or vacation and really understanding the cultural differences. And as I did more projects both abroad and with companies here in the States, and we would do a lot of business with companies owned by corporations that were abroad. And there was always cultural differences. And a lot of times there would be high turnover rate, there would be high language barriers, and we would come in as consultants to help out with that work and being able to bridge those gaps and try to overcome some of those challenges. So as my career progressed and I went back to the local area, which is what Southern Indiana Works is, and I think Ashley mentioned the 6 counties that we represent, there is a number of large global corporations within our footprint. Yum Brands, which is Pizza Hut and Taco Bell and KFC. We have a UPS World port here in Louisville. I actually live in Louisville and commute across the river. We have Ford, we have Papa John's, but more importantly to me than those large global corporations is the smaller businesses that either supply corporations that are overseas, or they trade or export or import products to and from the United States. And there's a number of those that you would never have any clue that had global connections in everyday life, or that your grandparents retired from. General Electric is a huge company here in the metro area, and they are certainly globally connected. So it really goes from my very small town of Churubusco, Indiana, to really understanding that we are in a global economy. And, if anything has come from the pandemic, it's how much more connected we've become with meetings like Zoom and everything, where you can work for a company based in Montreal and live in Corydon, Indiana, quite easily. So I guess that's where I'll stop.
Tony, thank you so much. I love what you said about that you and Marie do very similar work today, but the path that you took to get there was so wildly different. And you developed the skills in different ways, different experiences. And that's, I think, a really good takeaway for our audience of high school and college students, that there's not one path, particularly for global careers. There's so many different paths you can take and intentionally stay connected globally. So thank you, Tony. And Tracy, would you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little more about your work.
Sure. I am really fortunate to work for Berry Global, which is a pretty large company that you may have not heard of. We're based out of Evansville, Indiana, so neighbor to some of the folks on the panel. And we have now a tremendous global footprint with 48,000 employees. More than half of them are located outside the United States. And I'm really fortunate to be able to lead talent acquisition, talent management, learning and development, succession planning for the organization. So in the 8.5 years that I've been with Berry, I've gotten to go all over the world to work and learn different cultures and build partnerships with people across the globe. So, in my role where I started out, and I was really thankful, Shane and Tony, that you were in front of me, because Marie, I wish that I had had your clarity of vision when I was in high school and college. I went to school to be an attorney. It wasn't science, it was the other classes that you had to keep taking that I just couldn't cross the barrier, but knew I had a passion for working with people. So got into human resources and just found my way through instructional design and finally into talent management. I was actually with a smaller company that Barry acquired about 5 years ago, and then have had the fortune to be with the company as it's continued to grow over the last 5 years. But in my role, I've gotten to work in Spain, in the Netherlands, in England, France, Asia, South America. I've had a fantastic opportunity to build partnerships. And it's not only, with COVID, certainly life has changed, but even prior to that, you don't have to have a role in a global company that you're constantly on a plane traveling to another country. There's great opportunities to work with people every day that come from different cultures and backgrounds. You're working with them via Zoom, or you're collaborating on different projects and different parts of innovation. So there's a lot of fantastic things that you can do even as you start in a company that allows you to have this global reach. So I will tell you, I worked primarily for US-based companies until the last 8 years, and the difference is amazing. I couldn't go back to that, to just a US-based company now, because just the joy of learning, as Tony said, how small the world is, how people across the world, how many similarities we have, and how tight of a relationship you can build. It's a fantastic journey.
Tracy, thank you so much. I loved hearing from all of our panelists just now. The really wide variety of experience, I think, is so important for our audience to hear. There's so many ways to be engaged globally. It's never too late. My guess is with our panelists today, all of us would probably say we're still trying to figure out what we want to do when we grow up. I'm certainly in that boat. There's so many ways to engage globally in different industries too. And I think that's an opportunity to share with all of you who, I think as students, we tend to think to do global, I have to go study international affairs or something connected to that. And clearly from our panel, that's just not true. There are actually a lot of skill sets that you can build alongside a technical function that help you do that technical function better. Whether it's recruitment of talent, whether it's development of talent, whether it's economic development in a community. And Garrett, I'd love to come back to you quickly. Computer science isn't, the first thing that comes to mind is not global cultures, but can you tell us a little bit more about the ways you engage globally every day in your work?
Yeah, of course. So I do work in computer science, but there's always an element of communication with that. So like I always have to communicate with overseas contractors, or even just this week I was talking to kind of a separate business unit in Ireland. So we're working on their machines. So we have to discuss with them how they use their machines and what their exact requirements were. So that was fun to do. And you always have to be cognizant of their specific culture and language. And it's very interesting. And also we always have to be aware of the different time zones. So for example, a few weeks ago, I had to do a meeting at 7 p.m. because the meeting was also involving someone from Germany and someone from China. So that was the best time to arrange the meeting.
That you are so far ahead of the game already, because even as a US colleague, to have the thought to say, you know what, the best time isn't between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. US. Actually, maybe there's a different time in our day. Now, COVID has definitely opened up that concept for many of us beyond what it used to be, but that's such a great principle. Is everyone on your team, if you're in multiple time zones, might have to at some point take a meeting out of your normal hours, but being the first one to step up really shows a lot of respect and kind of deference to the challenges of working globally with your company. That's awesome. I want to also talk to Shantz and Tony both. There's a misperception here that Indiana is not particularly globally minded. And I can imagine, that's true of the whole state, but I think when you get outside of the central Indiana area, that misperception is probably even more pronounced. And so I'd be curious, can you share some examples, you started to in your intros, but some specific examples of companies that are working globally, and really what does that mean to your local economy? Maybe Chance, if we could start with you.
Yeah, so I'll touch on a couple different areas, both my time in Vanderbilt County and Lawrence County. You know, I think the thing that impacts me most, more often, is actually the way I got connected here was my relationship with the American China Society in Indiana. I'm a member of Japan American China Society, or Japan American Society, German American Chamber of Commerce. But in my career, I've worked with companies doing foreign direct investment from Italy, Japan. I got to work with a little bit with Hire, which is a Chinese company who's got locations, I believe, in Louisville and Evansville. And then I've been into Japan, done presentations to the Osaka Chamber of Commerce. So really, that investment and those companies are located in our backyard. The largest project ever to come to Lawrence County is actually a German-owned company. They're spending $600 million plus in Mitchell, Indiana, to build a new cement factory. So that's money coming from Germany into our local economy, hiring, right now about 500 construction workers as they put a 400-foot tower. But even on the locally owned scale, I have 4 or 5 companies locally who most people would just think that they exist in our bubble, but their primary functions as a business is to be a supplier to Japanese-owned auto manufacturers. So Indiana is home to Subaru, Honda, Toyota. They employ thousands of people by themselves, but downstream, there's many more thousands of people who are direct suppliers to those companies. And so they have to be able to sell to Toyota, sell to Honda, and be able to speak the same language and understand those cultures as well.
Chance, before we move on to Tony, can you share with that particular example? I think that's so helpful. It's something that as students, you may not realize that the supply chain provides just as many opportunities as the big name brand companies we've all heard of. Are there some roles that you're familiar with in those companies where some experience in study abroad, global languages, cultural communication and competencies would be really helpful? Is, the business side, is it the communications and marketing? Where could they look to plug in?
I think you're correct on both pieces. So obviously it'll change from company to company. Sales, obviously a big piece, marketing. If they're looking to sell their product to, if you're a Berry Global who is selling across the world, you have to be able to market to those different cultures that you're representing, whether that's business to consumer or business to business. Logistics, being able to understand those flows and processes, how the steel prices globally impact my companies right now who are struggling to even get access to steel. So the global market has really altered the way they operate businesses.
Awesome. Thank you, Chance.
Very good.
Tony, would you share a little bit about that in your community?
Sure. So, we are in Southern Indiana, directly south of Indianapolis on 65, right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. And we are part of the Louisville metro area. So when we talk about our region, we're really talking about that larger area. 2 of our largest sectors are manufacturing and logistics. So we sit right on the Ohio River. We have a international airport and world port hub from UPS, and we have an extensive rail line. So we, being as far west as we are from the East Coast, we actually can ship to both sides of the country fairly easily. So our manufacturers, and as Chance said, they're all linked together. And I was just trying to think of something unusual to say. Well, we have a a pretty robust popcorn industry, which is agricultural based, but they ship all over the world. And, we have a popcorn company that, 90% of their sales is leaving the United States. And, they employ 44 people in their good jobs. And, that's 44 families that are impacted every day through global networks. And, that popcorn is farmed here. It's harvested, it's processed, it's packed, and then it's shipped from Harrison County, Indiana to all over the world. And then that doesn't go to mention to all the tier suppliers that Chance was when it comes to the auto industry. We have Ford suppliers we have 2 Ford plants in Louisville. Toyota is over towards Evansville, and then the Honda and Subaru are north of us, along with Cummins and Columbus. So we have several suppliers, and again, those are all global positions. And those are sort of just the ones that you just come to your mind every day. But we have in Evansville the folks that make MREs, or there's just so many different things that are going on that one wouldn't just assume is a global supplier or importer. So I mentioned some big brands, Yum and Papa John's and BS and Ford, Humana. There's just a number of them. On the logistics side, we have a number of companies like Amazon and other distributors that are putting warehouses and operations within our 13 county area. And again, that's because of what's known as the 3 R's, right? Railroads, roads, and runways. We just have a great position geographically.
Tony, thank you so much. That's I love the thought about the popcorn, local, homegrown, but 90% leaving the United States, which means their marketing, their production, their shipping. There's so many layers of work done at that company that have a global connection. And most of us probably wouldn't imagine, oh, popcorn, that's a global company. I love it.
That's right.
Thank you. I want to pivot back to Marie. Some of the things that you talked about it's more, I think, what our students and audience would imagine is the traditional pathway to global careers. Now, today, it's not as obvious that your job that you work in now is directly global, but the background you have is really robust in study abroad and engaging globally in the things that you've learned. And I think where you can be helpful to our audience is, how do we talk about the skills you gain when you engage globally, when you do study abroad, when you study a language, when you're pitching and interviewing for a role here in Indiana that may not be explicitly global? What are some of the things you've learned that have impacted how you do your work every day that might be valuable for our audience?
Wasn't prepared to be off mute. There I am. Okay. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I have so many thoughts running through my head around what you've asked, Ashley. But I think where I feel like I need to start authentically is that while I appreciate my fellow panelists saying that it looked like I had a direct vision, it did not feel like it at the time. And what was important to me was to have international experiences, for sure. So I guess in that space, I had maybe more of a vision than others might have. But in terms of how that would translate to a career, I had very little vision, it turns out. And I think that's important and maybe not that unique. I mentioned the liberal arts management program, but I was also an English major, and I did not know exactly what I would do when I graduated. And I'll emphasize again that I had the opportunity to interview for working for like consulting companies, and instead turned that down, which isn't the most, from a parental perspective, maybe not the most logical decision. And then instead made the decision to go on a student visa and work like as a temp part-time. So it was I'd say a very slow start to my career. And I think that's in part because it's hard to translate the skills that you're gaining into what we would call today marketable skills. Or at least it was hard for me to figure out how to do that back when I was in a similar position to the students on this call. But what I what I would share is, well, first of all, the resource that was placed in the chat is an excellent resource for how you might categorize your skills. And I had some of those same themes. So I'll share some of the themes of what I think is important that I now highlight when I talk about my experiences. First of all, I think I wasn't afraid to take a risk, and I wasn't afraid to, be independent. And there's a lot of, I think, desire from an employer perspective for people who are good, solid, independent thinkers, and maybe are ready to take risks and not afraid to fail in some ways. So I think that is a category that I would now highlight. There are a lot of problems that I had to solve when I went and studied abroad, and learned languages, and again, didn't speak well all the time to everyone, but I gained a lot in my ability to communicate as a result of those individual experiences. Which is nothing to say of like I think the most obvious one that most people would point to is the importance of talking about your competency and like comfortability in lots of different cultures, and being around lots of students. I would often reference that I had roommates from Turkey, Japan, from Greece, and from Kenya when I lived in Europe, and those are very different cultures, all kind of colliding, and we all worked through a lot of understanding. Like we had a lot of understanding to do of each other, and in some ways biases and stereotypes to debunk as a result of our time together. And I think that kind of experience is also important to highlight. But I think that maybe the most important thing that students can share about themselves is that that creative problem solving thinker is, in my estimation, when I listen to employers now. So I very similarly to Tony and Chance, work with a lot of different employers in Central Indiana, and when we listen to what they say they need, and I hope this is representative for Tracy as well, but what they will often say is that the technical skills are something that can often be trained in a variety of different ways. And it is the employability skills, or the 21st century skills, that really matter to an employer and that help people to progress in a career. And it is exactly those kinds of skills that those studying world languages and those studying abroad are gaining through those kinds of experiences. So I would, if I were a student today, I would click on that link and add some detail to my resume about my ability to be a creative thinker, to be results driven, to be a risk taker, and more. Pattern analyzer, I think I saw. Those are all great and true skills that I think I probably gained, and many on the call have as well through their experiences.
Marie, thank you so much. As someone who, I also got the opportunity a few times to study abroad, both in undergrad and in graduate school. And it took me a while to figure out how to talk about those skills outside of a explicitly global career. And I think what really stood out to me is the risk taker, the independence, the willingness to just, yes, I'm going to go, in my case, moved to Moscow, Russia for a year as an undergraduate student. And I think my parents thought I was crazy and living dangerously, but that really shaped the way I think about my career and the way I think about engaging with others in the workplace. And while don't use my passport for my work every day here in Indianapolis at the International Center, that same skill set is so valuable in the work I do. And I agree. I think many of our employers, they may not know that what they're looking for is the students that have those life-altering experiences. And I think the tool that was shared in the chat and thinking about how to frame those experiences will be really helpful in whatever job our audience is looking for. Tracy, I think this is a perfect opportunity to hear from you a little bit more in your role doing talent attraction and retention. Not only are you, thinking about pulling talent from all over the Indiana, all over the US, and also now all over the world to come and work here in our state, you're also thinking about talent attraction and retention at many of your global locations. what does that look like now? Are you, does the talent attraction look different in the different countries that you're serving? And what does that look like for bringing talent here to our state?
Sure. I will tell you, one of the interesting things is that, across the globe, a lot of the entry point to these types of roles is through apprenticeships and through internships, which is, and it's something that when you are the personality types that Marie described beautifully, that when you harness these fantastic experiences by studying abroad or at least, studying languages and getting this, great talent, that is the perfect place to demonstrate those capabilities that you have. Going into an organization that's global where you can practice those exact skills is a great foothold to first you understanding if it's something that you like to do. And secondly, it gets the organization familiar with you and to see how you can demonstrate those skills. Sometimes it even happens and it's not something that was planned. For example, I have an intern in talent acquisition that goes to school in Kentucky, and she had to help me roll out a new system that we use for acquiring talent across the globe. So she got to work with people in Germany, in France, in Spain, the UK, all via her laptop. But as part of this internship, she was getting this great experience with all these different cultures. So that is something I wholeheartedly recommend to people. And, those can lead to experiences where you have availability to go and work in other countries. And, we bring in other folks from other countries to Indiana so that they can get the experience of working in our corporate office. So it's, when you work in a truly global company, it's helpful to have all the combination of cultures right where you can harness. And for everyone on this call that is getting skilled in languages and getting those experiences, those are so incredibly beneficial. I will tell you that it once you get past the senior leadership teams in the different countries, there isn't a lot of English as a second language. So it can be an incredible benefit and a lever that you have in your career to have the ability to communicate across all boundaries. So I think something that could really lead to success.
Tracy, thank you so much.
Actually, can I jump in real quick?
Please, absolutely.
I just wanted to say that, I think the importance of those employability skills, if we're talking about what employers want, whether it is an employer here or abroad, is exactly what Tracy and Marie are saying. And I had wrote down like 6 that I wanted to mention. And the first one was that critical thinking and problem solving. And it's the second one I had is ability to learn. And what I mean by that is you have to be able to be trained and be willing to learn new things. And those opportunities from work-based learning, whether it's going and studying abroad and doing an internship there, or even doing one here locally, or doing one virtually. We have, a shameless plug, 4 open internship spots, and 3 of those can be done virtually. So those kind of experiences are what I hear employers, but also as an employer myself and hiring individuals, when I see things like studied abroad, or see things that like an internship or a work experience, even if the applicant can't necessarily articulate the skills that they have, I know through my own experience that if they've done those, then they have ability to problem solve. They have ability to work as a team. They have independent thinking abilities and analytical thoughts. So it's just vitally important. And I mentioned this at the very top, that I truly regret not taking advantage of those opportunities as an undergrad or graduate student. So, my advice is to take advantage of those. And there's so many more opportunities than there was a few years ago when I was in college. So definitely look into that.
Tony, thank you so much. That's so well said. I think what you've just described, but the critical thinking, the ability to learn, I think is such a key thing. And sometimes that's hard to demonstrate on a resume. I learn quickly. And in my head, I think, yeah, they're going to think, yeah, okay, sure, I bet you do. But if you can demonstrate that through concrete examples of, hey, I was thrown into a foreign country and I figured it out, many of the things on my own, and I was successful and I built relationships so well that my supervisor for my internship in a foreign country is listed as a reference. Giving tangible evidence of the things you develop and learn can be really helpful as you're looking for careers here. Something that we haven't touched on a lot, but and I'll open it up, but I'd be curious for others to share. The thing that I learned late in my career was the importance of networking and what that actually meant. It's a buzzword. It's the thing your career advisor is going to say, network, network, network. But what does that even mean? And as an introvert myself, that was a big barrier for me. And it was really a few years after grad school that I actually understood what it meant and how it worked. And now I see the importance of it, where employers in many cases, yes, they're looking for your skill set. Yes, they're looking for an excellent resume and cover letter. Yes, describing your skills for global careers in this way is really vital. But the reality of the job market is often that a hiring manager for one position might have 100 applicants, 1,000 applicants. They can't possibly, accurately and closely look at every resume and cover letter that comes across their desk. And so one of the ways you, as an aspiring global leader, can set yourselves apart is through networking and demonstrating that all of those skills that we've described here today show up in how you build relationships with colleagues, mentors, extended family, folks in your, local organizations that you're volunteering in. In an ideal world, your credentials just put you in the position, but unfortunately, I finished my master's degree in Washington, D.C. I studied international affairs. I had dreams of working at the UN and the State Department, which I still hold on to, by the way. But then I waited tables for almost 2 years in DC looking for work. And that's because I didn't fully understand or really invest in the networking piece. And so I definitely implore our audience to think about that and how to do it appropriately at the age and the role you're in. As a college student, that might be building your network with your peers and with your professors and with your internship supervisors and companies. As you're graduating, it's staying in touch. It's not just reaching out when you need a reference. It's reaching out to say, hey, thank you. I thought of you today because I used a skill set I learned from you in my role that I worked alongside you. Do any of the other panelists have some thoughts about networking and the importance to your companies or to your industries?
Yeah. I guess I'll jump in here. I mean, I'll say that 90% of my role is about building relationships and connecting those relationships. I'll be the first to admit that I don't know all the answers to these problems that are coming at me. I'm sure Tony and Marie would say the same thing. Like, they come at us with some crazy problems, but to be able to say, wait, I know this person who's gone through the same thing as you, or I know this person. And then the other piece was in the economic development side, we have site selectors, we have business leaders, they have relationships established. And when you are a community like Lawrence County, who looks a lot like the communities across the Midwest. And so if you're competing with literally hundreds or thousands of other communities across the globe at some point, in some cases, those relationships, those networks are the difference between you getting even to be looked at in the first place. The other piece, and you just mentioned, building relationships and networking and engaging at a level that's appropriate, but also understanding, especially if you're talking about global cultures, the differences in those cultures, how you approach people from certain cultures, the idioms that we use or the language that may be common for the younger generation that the older generation doesn't understand. You know, I laughed real hard at one of my counterparts. We were in Osaka giving a presentation to business leaders, and he's a very funny man. But his jokes about turkeys and him saying gobble gobble did not land, and with about 100 people. And I could just see in his face like he could not figure out why. And then afterward, one of our partners from Toyota came over and was like, people here don't interact with turkeys. It's not a meat that they usually eat, and you're not going to find it. So the reference was just not there. So being able to put yourself, whether that's generational or culturally, in the right position to have those conversations are key.
And thank you.
I think I would just
say,
add,
Ashley, oh, sorry, go ahead, Marie.
No, Tracy, you go ahead. That's fine.
I would just say, you know, because I lead talent acquisition, that networking is really key. You're right. For every job, there could be a lot of different candidates. But, you know, if you happen to be able to connect on LinkedIn or through some other, you know, networking platform to the people that work there, we call it good gossip, right? So that you can spread the good gossip about somebody else. So it is so beneficial, you know, look and see what people in that organization are getting involved in. So, you know, for us, we do a lot of like litter pickups and a lot of sustainability work. You know, you can always volunteer to be a part of that to get to know more people and build, you know, networking partnerships through that. But super incredible. Marie, please. Go ahead.
I think I'll just add that, you know, as much as we would like for the world to be a meritocracy, it's not. And the networks that you have over time really do matter in ways that you'll never understand at the time that you're building certain relationships with people. And so I think Ashley's advice is smart. I always think of that adage that like luck equals opportunity plus preparation. There's this, and to me, I just believe that. I believe that I don't, at least with my children, we don't talk about people being lucky. We talk about how you take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you, and how you work to be prepared to be ready to take advantage of those opportunities. And so a lot of networking can seem really uncomfortable. But the more, at least it did for, you know, me at first. But I think the more that you do that in ways that are comfortable for you to start off with, the easier it becomes. So whether it is, you know, volunteer, I did a lot of theater back in the day as well. And so I would volunteer at theaters and meet lots of really interesting people. And now I sit on a board for the Indie Fringe, which has, again, a sort of national and global connection to other fringe theaters all around the world. So it's another way for me to stay connected into sort of global initiatives in a community. And that took, you know, a decade of just continuing to think about how I could engage in something like that now may circle back to my work, where we might be able to start like a youth corps of workers in the arts, right, associated with the Indie Fringe. So I think there's just always ways to continue to network, and it is a buzzword, but there isn't like a person on this call that wouldn't, you know, sit down with a student and have a conversation and give people ideas about how to connect or you know, build your LinkedIn profile or think about other connections. And people have certainly paid me that favor over time, people on this call, and I would certainly look to do that for others as well.
Marie, thank you so much. That was such a wonderful way to wrap up all of the expertise and thoughts all of the panelists have shared today. We have just a couple minutes, and we want to end on time for all of you that have taken your lunch hour to spend with us. You know, a couple of the things that really stick out are that the skills that you develop by engaging globally are absolutely relevant and useful and competitive in the job market, whether it's a global role or it's a domestic focused role. I think there's a lot of value in the experiences that you as students can get in global engagement. And a couple of the other things that really stick out to me, Tracy, I'm going to take away that good gossip. When you think about networking, you know, for me, a principle I have is that if a friend of mine, a professional contact of mine, forwards a resume to me for a job that we're hiring for, I'm at least going to call that person. That's out of respect for my professional relationship with the person that shared it with me. And no, that doesn't mean that the person that I call gets the job or gets preference, but I'm going to give them the opportunity to get in front of me by phone or in person. And sometimes that's all you need to be able to have the chance to share your experience and your expertise. So I know that many of my colleagues and those on this panel would probably hold a very similar principle in their professional life, that we really value the input of the people in our network. And so when they come to us with a recommendation, I take it really seriously. So as your students, high school and college students, as you're thinking about that, remember that the people in your network professionally and from academia can really help be the advocate for you as you're looking for your next step in your career. I do want to say and take the privilege that the International Center, where I work here in Indy, brings on 8 to 10 interns every semester and summer for a wide variety of roles. We really give students the chance to obtain really relevant global experience from right here in Indy. Whether it's engaging with State Department visitor groups, working with our relocations department that's helping, you know, bring in a normal year up to 150 employees and their families from around the world to live and work here in Indy, or to working in marketing, you know, really those technical skills of marketing and communications and fundraising that can be global or not. There's opportunities here. And I know that with our panelists, many of your organizations, Tony, you mentioned it too, bring on interns as well. And as Tracy said, those internships are the great pathway to get into a company, start to build the network in a very natural way, and kind of check it out, see if you like it, see if you like to do that kind of work. So please visit our website. I know in the follow-up communications from Teresa Nichols, we'll be providing notes probably for all of our organizations. I want to again thank our panelists, Shantz, Garrett, Tracy, Marie, Tony. Really appreciate you taking the time today to share your expertise and experience. And I'm glad to add all of you to my professional network as well. And I want to thank Teresa Nichols for helping organize this as a part of the Indiana Language Roadmap. The roadmap will send you a follow-up email with the panel recording and a digital folder of resources and opportunities. And we hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks so much for joining us. Cheers.